Good morning. Great. I would encourage everybody to please find a seat, claim a box lunch from the rear along with the drink, and settle in for today's events. I'm Steve Slick, for those of you whom I don't already know. I'm the director of the university's Intelligence Studies Project, and on behalf of our team, the Strauss Center for International Security and Law and the Clements Center for National Security, welcome to this year's National Security Career Fair. I should also note that our partners in this fair include Texas Career Engagement and the LBJ School of Public Affairs. We appreciate all the folks across campus who contribute to a large event like this one. So a little quick historical perspective. This is the fourth iteration of our National Security Career Fair. Our first effort was in 2019. It was a little more modest in size, but nonetheless was a terrific success. We received a good deal of positive feedback from the students and employers, and it was thrilling for us to receive feedback when students told us about their internships and their job offers that had resulted from contacts they made at the fair. So the COVID virus sidelined us in 2020. Last year, we were compelled to host this event virtually, but we're delighted today to bring everybody together in person. So we're proud of our students and excited when they choose to pursue careers in public service, foreign affairs, and national security. They're a well-prepared, patriotic, and diverse collection of future leaders. It's our daily privilege to teach, counsel, and prepare them to help keep the nation safe. So today we're hosting more than 20 employers. You've seen that outside. I hope you've had a chance to wander around and talk to some of the employers. It's a veritable who's who of American security and intelligence organization. I thought as I was reading this list, it actually reads more like a network TV schedule when you think about it. But bear with me while we recognize and thank each of them for participating today. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the Central Intelligence Agency, Consolidated Nuclear Security, Defense Intelligence Agency, the U.S. Secret Service, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Lawrence Livermore National Labs, Los Alamos National Labs, Marine Corps Intelligence, the Martin Crumpton Group, one of our related private sector employers here today, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the National Ground Intelligence Center, National Nuclear Security Administration, the National Security Agency, the National Counterterrorism Center, the Office of Naval Intelligence, the RAIN Network, Sandia National Labs, Strategic Insights Group, State of Texas Department of Public Safety, the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps, DHS's Customs and Border Protection, and last but not least, the U.S. Department of State, which is recruiting today for the Foreign Service, Diplomatic Security, and the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. So we do understand for our students in the back that you may have to come and go during the program to meet with the employers and also to get your classes on time. We appreciate that. We also want to recognize and thank our distinguished visitors, each of whom serves as a compelling role model for aspiring public servants. President Hartzell, Congressman and Minority Leader McCall, Assistant Secretary Holmgren, General Brooks, Dr. Malvesti, and Dr. Greitens. Thanks for joining us today. So here's a quick preview of today's program under the broad title of National Security Challenges, from 9/11 to Great Power Competition. First, I'm going to introduce Assistant Secretary Holmgren, who will share his thoughts on the future of intelligence support to diplomacy. Brett has agreed to field questions after his remarks in the time available. So just raise your hand, wait to be recognized, and we'll send a student volunteer with a microphone. After Secretary Holmgren wraps up, President Hartzell will introduce Representative McCall, who will then be joined in a conversation with my friend Will Imboden, the Executive Director of the Clements Center. Today's final event will be an expert panel discussion involving General Vince Brooks, Dr. Michelle Malvesti, and Professor Sheena Greitens. We've asked Secretary Holmgren to return to the stage so that he may participate in that discussion as well. Adam Klein, the new director of the Robert Strauss Center, will be moderating that discussion. So there will be an opportunity during the panel discussion as well for you all to direct questions to each of these experts. All clear? Good. Off we go. So last year at this time, almost to the day, Brett Holmgren was sworn in as the Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research. State INR, as it's known, provides all-source analytic support to the Secretary of State and U.S. diplomacy, and is an element of the broader U.S. intelligence community under the Director of National Intelligence. It is the oldest civilian intelligence organization in the United States and has a reputation for deep substantive expertise and, shall we say diplomatically, a firm commitment to the accuracy of its judgments. Right? So before taking over at INR, Brett served for 14 years in leadership positions in the IC, the Defense Department, and at the White House, where he was the Senior Director for Intelligence Programs on the National Security Council staff. Earlier in his public service career, Secretary Holmgren was an intelligence analyst with DIA and CIA. I know Brett to be a consummate professional, committed to ensuring that America's leaders receive the timely, accurate, and insightful intelligence they need to help keep us safe. So please join me in welcoming Assistant Secretary Brett Holmgren to Austin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Steve. Thanks to Steve's leadership, the Intelligence Studies Project at UT Austin has become a premier academic institution for the study of the intelligence community and an incubator of future talent in the IC. And so you all are deeply lucky to have Steve at the helm. And Steve, I'm very grateful for your counsel and friendship over the years. I also want to recognize Representative McCall, the ranking member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Representative McCall has been a leader on Homeland Security, counterterrorism, and a champion for America's role in the world. To President Hartzell, students and faculty members, ladies and gentlemen, let me say it is a pleasure to be here in Austin. Now, I had hoped to stand at this podium to congratulate the Longhorns on a victory over Alabama on Saturday. And until the last minute of the game, I thought I was going to be able to do just that. And I have to confess, as an alumni of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I was rooting for the Longhorns on Saturday. But instead, I offer my deepest condolences. And there's always next week. I'd like to begin by thanking the university for hosting such an important event. Now, I know firsthand the quality of public servants that UT Austin produces. And to prove it, I brought a distinguished member of my team, who's a proud Longhorn, with me here today, Dr. Steve Gelpern. Where are you? Now, Steve is an exceptional analyst and leader who serves as the acting division chief for our Office of Middle East and North African Affairs, and he is an embodiment of the talent that I know UT Austin produces. I have no doubt many of you are familiar with the State Department. I'm less confident you've ever heard of the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, better known as INR, until today. And that's okay. Even in Washington, not many people have heard of INR. But since there's a career fair on campus, I want to make a recruitment pitch for the organization that I am honored to lead. In addition to being the nation's oldest civilian intelligence agency, as Steve rightly noted, we're celebrating our 76th anniversary this year, 1 year older than my brethren at the CIA. There are three things that make INR unique. First, we're the only intelligence agency dedicated solely to supporting the Secretary of State and U.S. diplomats worldwide. At INR, we are on a mission to deliver and coordinate timely, objective intelligence that advances U.S. diplomacy. Our motto is intelligence empowering diplomacy, and we work hard every day to serve U.S. diplomats while modeling our core values of independence, integrity, teamwork, expertise, agility, innovation, and inclusivity. In a nutshell, our job is simple: making our customers smarter and better informed on the issues to make wise policy decisions. Second, we are one of the only IC agencies who are co-located with our policy customers. Now, in the United States, as many of you know, there is a bright red line between intelligence and policy, and for good reason: to protect the independence and objectivity of the intelligence community's work. While some may view the fact that INR analysts are literally steps away from our policy customers as a risk to that independence, we view it differently. Our proximity and access to policymakers enables us to respond more quickly to customer feedback and to gain a better sense of the policy environment, which in turn allows us to anticipate questions and produce more relevant, impactful analysis. Third, INR provides select products and services that support not only the department and the intelligence community, but the broader national security community. In addition to publishing all-source analysis, INR serves as the lead component in the intelligence community for analytic outreach to non-governmental organizations. We are the primary U.S. government entity for foreign public opinion polling and serve as the State Department's lead for managing and coordinating intelligence policy and oversight for U.S. missions abroad. We're also home to the geographer of the United States, or GOTUS, as we affectionately refer to him. So let me just say, if you are considering a career in the IC, I sincerely hope that you will check out our State Department booth in the career fair. And in the interest of transparency, you can follow us on Twitter at @StateINR. That's a shameless plug for our new Twitter account. 21 years ago yesterday, September 11th, Al-Qaeda conducted the largest terrorist attack on U.S. soil in our history. In a matter of hours, thousands were killed, lives were upended. It shook our nation to its core. The attacks were a stark reminder that no country can take its security for granted. In the years that followed, we hardened our defenses, improved intelligence sharing and coordination, we built strong alliances and partnerships overseas, and we brought those responsible for 9/11 to justice. For me, a lesson from 9/11 is that security is not a birthright. It is only thanks to the sacrifices and contributions of public servants of all stripes, our men and women in uniform, intelligence officers, law enforcement and homeland security professionals, and U.S. diplomats, that we have not experienced another large-scale attack on the U.S. homeland. Now, like many of my fellow Americans, 9/11 was a turning point. I decided to pursue a career in national security to help prevent another attack. And I realized that a lot of our students here today were born after 9/11. And the events of that horrific day may not resonate in the same way they do with people like me. Regardless of where you are in your career, the message I want to leave you with is this: America's response to 9/11 is a poignant reminder of the value and importance of public service. And so whatever inspires you to serve, whatever your calling is, be it preventing another terrorist attack, combating global pandemics, cybersecurity, countering the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, whatever that calling is, we will need your service, your talents, and your expertise to prevail in the 21st century. And I sincerely hope that our students here will consider a career in public service. It is, as President George H.W. Bush once said, a noble calling. 2 decades after 9/11, we are at an inflection point in history. The return of great power competition is upon us. We see this in President Putin's brutal and unprovoked further invasion of Ukraine. We see it in the multidimensional challenge posed by the People's Republic of China and the threat the PRC poses to peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. As President Biden has said, we are amid a great battle for freedom, a battle between democracy and autocracy, between liberty and repression, between a rules-based order and one governed by brute force. Meanwhile, the digital revolution, climate change, terrorism, infectious diseases remind us that the challenges of the 21st century are unconstrained by borders. At INR, we are focused on providing strategic insights and analysis to help our diplomats navigate a turbulent and unpredictable global landscape in the years ahead. Today, I want to talk about the 4 big trends that will shape how intelligence shapes diplomacy in the future. The revolution in open source intelligence, countering disinformation, technological innovation, and investing in diversity and inclusion. For years, people have equated open source intelligence, or OSINT, as it's called in the community, with what you read in foreign newspapers, what you see on TV, what you heard on the radio overseas. For these reasons and others, OSINT has never been viewed on par with traditional sources of intelligence, recruiting human sources, like Steve did, intercepting communications, overhead imagery. OSINT simply wasn't viewed as a secret to be acquired, which therefore reduced its attractiveness. In recent years, however, new technologies like artificial intelligence and commercial sector tools have enabled citizens around the world to exploit, process, analyze, and report on information and breaking events in near real time. In Ukraine, we've seen the power of OSINT in holding Russia accountable for its heinous attacks on civilians. Last month, for example, a new report from Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab, which the State Department supports, documented in vivid detail evidence of Russian-perpetrated filtration operations in Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast. The report was entirely based on open sources, unclassified information, derived from satellite imagery, commercial tools, social media, and first-hand accounts. The improved quality of open source reports, like this one, has in turn resulted in greater demand for OSINT among the IC's traditional customer base, from policymakers in the White House to military commanders and diplomats abroad. The appetite for OSINT is only growing. And that's why in INR, we're embracing OSINT. And we are reimagining not only how we acquire and use open source intelligence to inform our analysis, but how we can produce unclassified assessments based entirely on OSINT, while adhering to the IC's superior analytic tradecraft and production standards. Generating assessments in the future at the unclassified level will also allow us to expand our reach to our customer base overseas and enable us to engage a broader set of stakeholders, from academic institutions like the University of Texas to tech companies, NGOs, and most importantly, to the American people, which is our most important customer. Of course, harnessing the power and potential of OSINT and creating new unclassified product lines is easier said than done. Several important questions still need to be addressed before we can realize the true potential of OSINT. Questions like, how do you evaluate the veracity and credibility of open source reporting? How do you assign and communicate confidence levels in analysis that is based solely on OSINT? Should OSINT be its own intelligence discipline, like HUMINT and SIGINT? How do you ensure that analytic knowledge obtained through classified sources doesn't creep into unclassified assessments? These are all important, weighty questions that we will need to answer, but that will be vital in order for the intelligence community to take advantage of this revolution. In INR, to work through these issues, we've established an open source coordination unit earlier this year. This unit is focused on creating the governance, the training, and the organizational structures necessary to provide our officers with the tools and resources needed to optimize the use of OSINT and to create new unclassified products that are consistent with IC security directives and tradecraft. How we use OSINT will also be key to the second big trend that will shape how intelligence supports diplomacy: countering the pernicious threat of disinformation. Now, this threat, as many of you know, is not new. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union made active measures to essentially foreign influence and information operations the centerpiece of its efforts to expand communist ideology and influence around the world. What's new today is the scope, sophistication, and magnitude of the threat, all enabled by the digital revolution. Last year, the National Intelligence Council warned that both internal and external actors are increasingly manipulating digital information and spreading disinformation to shape public views and achieve policy objectives. One needs to look no further than Russia's influence in the 2016 presidential campaign, China's false claims that the United States created the COVID-19 virus, and Russia's prolific use of disinformation and outright lies regarding their further invasion of Ukraine. The ease with which malicious actors can exploit social media and new technologies to conduct disinformation campaigns at scale and relatively low cost means this will be an enduring threat. The good news is that we know how to minimize its impacts: enhancing public awareness, quickly exposing and debunking influence campaigns, and building resilient communities at home. Intelligence will play a key role in identifying, exposing, and, as appropriate, sharing intelligence with foreign partners and the public regarding foreign disinformation campaigns. In Ukraine, we've seen the value of strategically downgrading and declassifying intelligence to expose Russia's lies and nefarious plans. As other actors, including China, Iran, cybercriminals, increasingly turn to influence campaigns, from election interference to trying to shape U.S. policy, we need to be able to arm our diplomats and policymakers with credible information on these activities so they can engage partners and allies and warn the public. In INR, we are preparing to meet the growing demand for downgrading and declassifying intelligence. We're doing this by hiring more officers to process intelligence sharing and disclosure requests. On topics like Russia, China, and North Korea, we are encouraging our analysts to write at the lowest classification level possible, what we call writing for release, to make the assessments available to the widest number of cleared partners and allies. We're also actively looking for opportunities to downgrade and declassify intelligence assessments to support diplomatic engagements and initiatives. Just last week, INR released, for the first time, a declassified intelligence assessment of Russia's plans to hold sham referenda elections in occupied Ukrainian territory. We intend to declassify and release more public assessments like these in the future. Now, I want to acknowledge that the concept of intelligence diplomacy is not without risk or its detractors. As someone who began their career in the intelligence community, I know that protecting sources and methods must always be the highest consideration in these decisions. There will never be a one-size-fits-all approach. I also realize that the IC's credibility is at stake every time we publicly release a report or publicly disclose a sensitive piece of information. Look, the reality is we won't get it right every time. but we can maintain the IC's credibility with the American people and the world by acknowledging when we get it wrong and correcting the record expeditiously. If we are to succeed in pushing back against foreign disinformation, we'll need to be more creative and more comfortable with sharing intelligence in unclassified means to expose and disrupt these activities. The third big trend that will shape how intelligence supports diplomacy is technological innovation. Secretary Blinken has said that when it comes to cyberspace and emerging technologies, we have a major stake in shaping the digital revolution and making sure that it serves our people, protects our interests, boosts our competitiveness, and upholds our values. In INR, we have a sacred responsibility to safeguard the Department of State's top secret network, which we own and operate in our bureau. We're committed to making sure that our technology works for democracy and serves our diplomatic corps, helping to counter disinformation, ensuring the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the sensitive data on our network, and being able to deliver classified information quickly and securely to diplomats at home and abroad whenever and wherever they need it. For too long, technological innovation had been an afterthought in INR. We accepted good enough solutions. While this approach may have worked in the past, it is unsustainable in a hyper-connected digital world where the speed of diplomacy moves in real time. That's why we've embarked on a digital transformation as part of INR's 2025 strategic plan. We are making technology central to INR's future and reimagining how we use technology to drive mission and business imperatives. This includes going all in on the cloud and taking advantage of the IC's Commercial Cloud Enterprises contract. To expand access to information to diplomats overseas, we're re-architecting our classified computing environment for the field so that it's more modern, more flexible, and more secure. At the same time, we know that executing a digital transformation requires more than just upgrading technology. It requires fundamentally changing how you think about and use technology so it becomes an accelerant for your strategy. That's why a big part of our approach in INR is focused on establishing best-in-class governance practices so that we are managing risk appropriately and integrating our technology leaders into business strategy and decisions. Over the last year, we established a new Information Technology Governance Board. We created Chief Information Officer and Chief Information Security Officer positions. And we elevated the CIO's stature by making it a direct report to me as the Assistant Secretary. I'm under no illusion how long this digital transformation will take. It will be a multi-year journey, but we have no choice. To modernize how we deliver intelligence to support diplomacy, we're going to need to think and act more like a tech company than a traditional IT office. Finally, we cannot have a conversation about innovation and creativity without addressing diversity. Not just in gender, race, or sexual orientation, all of which are important, but also diversity of experiences, viewpoints, and skill sets. As Director of National Intelligence Haynes has said, promoting diversity, ensuring that we reflect the country we serve, is a responsibility we carry as public servants. In the IC and in the State Department, we know that diversity is essential not only to our national security mission, but to our values and who we are as Americans. When it comes to intelligence, diversity of views and perspectives is vital to guarding against confirmation bias and groupthink, and encouraging dissent and independent thought. Now, INR has a long tradition of independence, and I'm very proud to lead a workforce that was the only IC agency to dissent on the 2002 Iraq Weapons of Mass Destruction assessment. But our ability to provide unique, value-added perspectives moving forward will depend on having a team with diverse backgrounds, viewpoints, and knowledge to look at data differently, offer alternative views, and to challenge conventional wisdom. We're going to continue to need experts on issues like China, Russia, the Middle East, people like Steve. But we're also going to need more data scientists, more climate experts, more infectious disease specialists, and more computer engineers. In INR, we have made diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, which is referred to as DEIA, a core pillar of our 2025 strategic plan. We created a new DEIA senior advisor role led by Laurel Heflin, who, if she's not in this room, she's outside staffing the career booth. We rolled out a DEIA strategy. We established an internal leadership council to drive progress and to hold me and my leadership team accountable for driving results. We're using data and analytics to understand our workforce demographics better and where we need to improve to realize our vision. And last but not least, we are reorienting our recruitment and outreach activities to focus on attracting talent from a more diverse network of universities and communities throughout the country, which is part of the reason we're here in Austin today. So these are the 4 big trends that will shape intelligence support to diplomacy. The revolution in open source intelligence, countering disinformation with intelligence diplomacy, technological innovation, and investing in diversity and inclusion. Now let me end where I began. At this moment in history, we are engaged in a defining struggle between democracy and autocracy around the world. To meet this moment of advancing authoritarianism, the United States is once again leading with diplomacy. Ultimately, for diplomacy to be effective, it needs to be informed by the best intelligence and insights available to deliver what we refer to as diplomatic decision advantage. For the students here today, I can say that the IC and the State Department will need your expertise, your skills, and ultimately your service to meet these challenges. Now, the UT motto is, as I understand it, what starts here changes the world. And I hope that each of you will consider a career in national security, and perhaps one in INR, to change the world moving forward. Thank you all very much. Hook 'em horns. So we're going to do a few questions, is that right? Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thank you for all that you and your team do for the country. I grew up with Radio Free Europe, you know, so that may not exist anymore, but what are some of the means that the State Department currently uses to spread the good news about the United States around the world?
Sure. And I'll preface this just by saying that since I'm in the intel community, I got to talk about intelligence community issues. I'll stay away from commenting on the broader State Department, except for to make some general statements, which is, look, at the end of the day, our diplomats on the front lines at our missions abroad really are the leading voices for America. And so people like our public affairs officer here, Jared Yancey, who served overseas, those are the leading voices. It's our ambassadors, our diplomats on the ground talking to real people and engaging with governments. They are the face of America overseas. Now that a lot of it is aided by, back in Washington, huge institutions and communications apparatuses that are designed to support them. And so at the State Department, we have the Global Engagement Center, which has played an enormously important role working with the intelligence community, other parts of the US government, to help identify and to counter and publicly label foreign disinformation campaigns. So there's both an overseas component on the ground, and then there's a larger apparatus, at least back here in Washington, led by the State Department's Public Affairs organization. Sure.
I'm just curious. I want to know about the development of the Office of Propaganda and what's happened with that. That was originally supposed to be defense funded and a part of the Department of State. And I graduated 2 students who were perfect fits for that, culturally competent, language competent, and absolute masters of cyber. And they sort of got redirected to FBI and counterintelligence and that sort of stuff. What happened to that if we're going to be able to counteract disinformation?
Sure. So I'm not sure exactly what has happened to the office that you mentioned, but I would say that in the State Department and in the intelligence community more generally, there are a number of ways that folks who have experience and expertise, whether it's on communications or counterintelligence activities, people who want to play a role in helping to counter, disinformation worldwide. I just look at what we do in INR and in the intelligence community, and there are numerous opportunities, right? Whether you're a public affairs officer, to include for the intelligence community, and you're working with partners in other parts of the government to help put together, kind of public messaging that is used to counter disinformation. In the intel community, you have analysts who are poring over intelligence to expose disinformation plans and activities of foreign governments, and then sharing that information in formal assessments for our policymakers. Of course, you've got the other parts, the FBI and others who have the domestic responsibilities for that, wherever there's a nexus with foreign intelligence. But I think there are a range of ways that people who are interested in, in serving in capacities to counter disinformation, it runs the gamut from, in the intelligence community, numerous opportunities as an analyst, as an operations officer, to even on the policy side, whether it's you want to be a public affairs official or, or others who are engaged in, public diplomacy outreach. Sure.
Hi, thanks for those great remarks. Right, I had one question. This is of course cumulative over a long career in the Foreign Service and the clandestine service, and I was just curious if you had considered it. And that's state's role as a collector of intelligence, not necessarily analysts of intelligence or executors of policy, but rather their role is collecting information from overseas and bringing it back home. I'm referring to the absolutely unique and tremendous insights that U.S. ambassadors and senior U.S. diplomats have in the foreign countries where they're assigned. And have you taken a look at whether all that information, that insight, that experience, that wisdom that resides in our foreign service is effectively communicated back to Washington against the requirements that the administration has directed and is made available to all the analysts who on a daily basis could benefit from it? I know in the past there have been some hurdles, some obstacles when we knew things overseas, had brilliant people assigned in difficult places, yet their insights weren't routinely available to analysts in Washington who could have benefited from them.
Sure, it's a great question, Steve, and I should just be clear up front. The Bureau of Intelligence and Research, INR, we do not have collection authorities, so we do not have any collection capabilities. We do foreign public opinion polling. It's all overt. Some label that as collection. It's not. It's overt. People know they're being polled, and that information is incredibly valuable. But we don't have a clandestine collection capability. The State Department, as you pointed to, has a huge diplomatic reporting responsibility. And so that is when an ambassador or a diplomat overseas is meeting with a foreign official and they acquire information of relevance to U.S. policy or U.S. interest generally, we strongly encourage them to report that information in official cable traffic. Of course, they're not responsive to the intelligence community collection priorities because our diplomats are not members of the intel community, but we highlight for them when things they do report make it into an assessment like the President's Daily Brief INR, one of the things we do on a monthly basis is provide data out to the field so that our ambassadors and our political officers and other diplomats know, here are how many of your reports that you sent in from the field that were official cable traffic. Here's how many made it in some way in front of the president or other senior policymakers. That's a huge incentive for those people to report. But I'd say we still have a ways to go to get it more streamlined. And part of it's a technology solution to make it easier and more efficient for folks overseas to quickly write up their notes and to send them in a more streamlined manner. Sure.
You have outlined a very exciting prospect for students to go into a career in national security. I am not a student, but there are many students here. How would you project a good way to think about a career in the field? Does one join one agency and work his whole career or her whole career in that agency? Is it better to work in a number of different areas? Is it better to work in the private side and come back into the public side? How would you advise a student to think about how he or she might pursue their career in your field?
Yeah. The short answer is all the above. And I think that's different than the answer someone probably would have given 10 or even 20 years ago. And I say that because actually one of the things we're doing in the intel community, and that we're doing here, at least in INR, but I know the State Department is generally, is encouraging folks to have a range of different experiences in their professional careers. Now, we, of course, if you join INR, we want you there forever. We don't want you to leave. And in fact, most of our officers stay for their entire career. But we also recognize that the market today is such that, newer generation of folks tend to have, more than 5 or 7 jobs throughout their lifetime. And so we encourage that. We just have to embrace it, and we need to take advantage of that. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second is, ultimately, for students who are thinking about a career in national security, the best advice I will give you is to don't try to chart your path. Don't try to chart your course early on. Do what interests you. Do what motivates you. And do what you're in, that really gives you a sense of purpose. Because I've found that, doing things that interest you, where you feel like you're having an impact, that's where you're going to get the most out of your job and the most out of your experiences, and frankly will make you better and kind of more qualified moving forward. So I hope that answers some of the question, but I think it's very different environment today in the market, the job market, than it was several years ago, and so we really do welcome a diversity of experiences. Please.
Steve tells me I have 2 minutes, so I'll be brief. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the role of intelligence diplomacy in light of what we've seen over the course of the last year with the conflict in Ukraine. So obviously, there was a pretty important and maybe unusual decision to declassify certain information early as a form of strategic warning and coalition building. I wondered if you could talk about how you think that sets or shouldn't set precedent for future crises, because there may be temptation or requests from allies and partners to get information early every time something sort of pops on the global screen, which it does regularly.
Yep.
So this seems like a really important question, in particular for INR, because you sit in-house with the State Department and with the front line of American diplomacy. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that challenge. Thanks.
Really important question, and to say a few things. One, as I mentioned in the remarks, there's no one-size-fits-all to this approach. And I mean that, I think used carefully and selectively, as we've seen in the Ukraine context, it can be a very valuable tool in exposing, Russian plots and exposing false flag operations. So it'll have to be case by case. I think, having said that, as long as the intelligence community continues to exercise the long-standing processes for reviewing declassification and downgrading requests, which I've seen during my time here the last year, that gives me comfort in knowing that ultimately those same processes that have been around for a long time are the ones that are being used to help the intelligence community. They're ultimately the ones who make those declassification decisions in terms of what can be shared, what can't. That's what I've seen. That gives me comfort in, even though we're doing it more and there's more moving through the system, the volume's greater, I'm comfortable because I know at the end of the day, it's the experts, the collectors, and the agencies who are reviewing the request and saying, yes, we're comfortable, no, we're not, or we're comfortable with significant revisions to the language. And so as long as those institutional processes are followed, I think it can be a very valuable tool moving forward. Yeah. Thank you.